Welcome into a new edition of the Sports Hub Training Camp Sports Hub Patriots Podcast Training Camp Edition. I'm Alex Barth from 98.5 The Sports Hub, and joining us from Green Bay, where the Patriots held their first joint practice of two with the Green Bay Packers today, is Doug Kyed of the Boston Herald to relay what he saw and what the Patriots are doing in what is really the most impactful training camp they've had in all of practice. So, Doug, first off, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, yeah. Coming here from beautiful Green Bay in my hotel room. Wish I had like a beautiful Lambeau Field backdrop behind me or something, but yeah, this is more convenient.
So Bill got the question that he always gets about the history of Green Bay and all that. But like, what I don't know if you've been there before, but what is it like? Is there that kind of, when you go to Fenway, you get that feeling? Does that exist in Green Bay and around Lambeau?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is my second time here in Green Bay. I was also here in, 2014 when they played Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and I wasn't there last year when they played there. But no, it is. It's like, I don't know. I equate it a little bit just as far as vicinity goes, maybe to a little bit like Foxborough or Buffalo, where it feels like you're basically just like kind of in the middle of a small town. And it's even more so than that at Green Bay because you're like literally across the street from just residential houses. So it's a very odd feel here in Green Bay, but it's also just really cool because, yeah, there is that history there. And it's actually pretty amazing that a team from such a small city has withstood time and stayed here for all of those years after being, one of the original NFL franchises and everything like that. And yeah, Bill Belichick loves to drop, Nitschke and Finkel and Lambeau and all of these names every year when they're playing the Packers. But it is definitely pretty cool to be here.
It's also, like I mentioned off the top, like the first joint practice, and Bill will go on a lot too about the value of those. Did you notice maybe a higher level of intensity or anything like that with it being against a new group of competition here today?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind about what I noticed from practice was just honestly how long it was. It was a very, very, very long practice that started around 10:30 for some of the individual warm-ups. I think it carried on past 1 o'clock. So there were so many reps taken by, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi on the Patriots side of the ball, and all three of the Packers quarterbacks, obviously Jordan Love, but then also Sean Clifford and Alex Mapu for their offense. And it was just really rapid fire, and I think that they got a ton of really valuable work in. It was interesting talking to Trent Brown afterwards, and I forgot who it was. Someone asked him about going up against the Packers pass rushers and how difficult it is to go up against the Packers defense. And he actually said that, they're used to that kind of thing because the Patriots defense throws the kitchen sink at the offense. So I think that if anything, this might be really valuable for the Patriots defense to get some work up against a different offense that shows them some different looks, comes from that Shanahan style.
So what did you think about how the Patriots defense responded today?
I thought they were solid. We were talking about it downstairs. I was talking to Andrew Callahan, also of the Boston Herald, and then also Mark Daniels is here with us from the Providence Journal. And probably a bit of a draw, I'd say, overall. I was focusing more on the Patriots defense today than the offense because the field is really long here in Green Bay, so they kind of split things up, and it's hard to see both sides at once. So for about half the practice, I was watching the Patriots defense, and they all came together, and I was able to watch both. But I thought the Patriots defense responded well. It's tough because you don't have Jonathan Jones in there, who's really one of the Patriots' better cornerbacks. But Isaiah Bolden was actually able to make some plays today. Shaun Wade was able to make some plays today. And I know that we're kind of getting into minutia right away here, but with some of the uncertainty surrounding Jack Jones with his legal situation, with Jonathan Jones, who we haven't seen at practice now for over a week, you might need one of those backup cornerbacks to step up for the Patriots right now. So it's actually pretty good to see Shaun Wade, who's got some good size, Isaiah Bolden, a rookie, also a guy with good size, stepping up to make some pass breakups. And the one that Bolden had was actually over Christian Watson, one of the Packers, star second-year wide receivers with great speed and everything like that. Came on a pass from Jordan Love. So good to see some of the young cornerbacks stepping up a little bit.
No, Minuccia's good.
One other thing, sorry.
Doing this podcast. No, you're good.
The minutia is great. I would also say that there was a ton of pressure for the Patriots overall in this practice. Josh Uche and Matthew Judon getting a lot of pressure. Dietrich Wise, I think, had like 2 or 3 sacks or would-be sacks. They're obviously not bringing these quarterbacks down to the ground, but no matter whether it was the first team or second team for the Packers offense, the Patriots defense was just generating a ton of pressure.
How about Marte Mapu? Finally out of that red non-contact jersey. First look at him in kind of live-ish reps, as live as practice gets. What did you think of his performance today?
He stood out a couple times. He had to run stuff pretty early in practice, so that's good to see him getting a little bit more physical now that he's out of that red non-contact jersey. And then he was also, back pretty deep on an incompletion that Jack Jones forced on a deep throw. So it was good to see his range a little bit on that play, to be at least near the receiver on a downfield throw, because that's the thing that no one really totally knows about Marte Mapu at this point, is how he can be as a rangy safety. We know that he can play in the box. He played a lot in the slot at Sacramento State, but as dumb as it sounds, like, we don't have testing numbers on Marte Mapu. So we've seen him at times being in kind of a deep safety role in the Patriots defense, whether that's on the scout team or first team or whatever it is. But he's a 6'3", 230-pound defender, and those types of guys usually don't play free safety. If he had ran a 4.4 coming out of college, I think we'd all be a little bit more comfortable about it, but we don't know what his speed is there. So that might be some trial and error at times for the Patriots, even in preseason, to see what Marte Mapu will look like, whether that is in the box as a linebacker or safety, back deep as a free safety, maybe taking some snaps out of the slot. But I don't know. You've probably talked about Marte Mapu a lot on this podcast a lot, but yeah. I just really like his attitude in talking to him. He, like, something about his mentality, the way he talks, the way he answers questions, his kind of quiet confidence reminds me a little bit about Dante Hightower. Very different players, but I think that, if he can be a really good player in this Patriots defense, I could see him being a captain in this defense 2 or 3 years down the line. That's the type of guy that he seems like.
And we saw during the preseason game, he's working with Steve Belichick and getting the calls in, and we've heard all the players and coaches rave about all these questions he's asked. This was an interesting step, though, I would think, because you're seeing him maybe, he's been making calls, he's been making adjustments based on the same offense he's seen over and over and over for months now, and then he goes to Green Bay and he gets a different look. Did you see any of that from him today, some of that pre-snap communication stuff against a different look?
I wasn't seeing a lot of that, but I will say that there was never a time that he looked like he was getting, exploited out there. He was never, I don't think he was beat in coverage when he was out there. So I didn't notice any bad plays by him, which I think is really, when you're looking at a rookie, one of the more important things, because Christian Gonzalez was beat deep at one point. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains with an outside cornerback, especially going up against some talented young wide receivers. But that was the other big takeaway from Mapu's performance, is just that like I said, didn't notice any bad plays from him. So I'm actually really curious to see what he looks like once he can actually get into a preseason game as well. All
right, you mentioned Christian Gonzalez there. Just reading off Twitter, it seemed like the play of the day was a deep post to Christian Gonzalez from Jordan Love, and they were kind of, it was relayed a couple different ways. I don't know if you saw that and kind of what you saw in the play, and if Gonzalez was really in coverage or if it was, off responsibility or something like that.
No, I think he wasn't in coverage on the play, and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs kind of did get the better of the Patriots receivers at times. One thing I'll say is, we were talking about even Mac Jones and Jordan Love, like how they compared to each other in these practices. Jordan Love was putting some good touch on those deep balls and hitting his wide receivers in stride. So I would say that, that type of play, when Christian Gonzalez was beat deep by Jordan Love, it's almost as good of a throw as it was. I don't necessarily look at that as being that bad of a play by Christian Gonzalez. You probably would have liked him to catch up a little bit better. You would have liked him to be able to break up the pass or whatever. Obviously, you never want a guy to get beat deep, but it really was a pretty fantastic throw by Jordan Love when he was able to beat Christian Gonzalez. So, it wasn't perfect by Christian Gonzalez, but I think the first 2 times that he was targeted, he didn't let up a completion. And overall, I think it was probably a net positive day for Christian Gonzalez, but there was the one big play that was made on him.
All right, let's move over to the offense. Before we get to the guys that did rep heavily today, I want to get to a guy that didn't, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. Made his Patriots debut. It sounded like he just went through some positional drills, and that was it. Bill Belichick talked about him. What did you make of his day-to-day, the way he was used, and did anything that Belichick said stand out?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Ezekiel Elliott he did not participate in competitive team drills. He was out there early in practice. Basically, the way the Patriots did this was the Patriots all came out of the facility or whatever, walked onto one practice field, did kind of their traditional individual warm up on that field, and then left for a field behind the Packers field house to then have their joint practices with the Packers. So Ezekiel Elliott did participate in that first portion of practice that was on one practice field, did not do anything competitively against the Green Bay Packers, but he was out there catching passes, going through ladder drills, basically going through everything that all of the other Patriots running backs were doing during that individual portion of practice, some walkthrough stuff, taking some handoffs from Mac Jones, but clearly not ready now at this point to be taking on a full contact workload or anything like that. So I'm not sure what that will mean for tomorrow. I think that, when a guy's been out of football since January or whatever it was in the last time the Cowboys played, you probably do need some sort of ramp-up period, probably not ready to get hit right away. So maybe we see him for that third preseason game, but probably wouldn't expect too much more out of him as far as this week goes. But I don't know. I thought that Bill Belichick, you never really know what you're going to get out of Bill Belichick when they sign a guy. And he gave more maybe than he usually would. He said, it's going to be great to work with Zeke. He said that he went through some of the I'm trying to find the exact quote that he gave, because I thought it was kind of interesting that he was talking about, some of the things that he went over with Ezekiel Elliott just when he came for the trip. He said that he went over terminology and plays and protections. And he said a couple of times that, it's good to have a Zeke on board. So seems like he's really excited about it. Seems like Mac Jones is really excited about it. I would say that in the past, when Ramondre Stevenson was asked about Ezekiel Elliott, maybe he didn't seem like that excited about the possibility, and that changed today as well. Now he said that, he was really excited to get to. He said that that's my guy. He's been with him. He's got to know him since 2021. And Trent Brown was really complimentary of Ezekiel Elliott. Mac Jones was really complimentary. He said that him and Ramondre Stevenson are going to make a great 1-2 punch. So I don't know. Seems like hopes are pretty high, just as far as what Patriots players were saying about Elliott. And I don't know, I think I tend to agree. I don't think he can be the Ezekiel Elliott that he was when he was a rookie. But one thing that I found really interesting about the signing, I'm curious for your take on this as well, is that this is a much differently constructed backfield than the Patriots usually have, where traditionally in a Patriots offense, it's that big early down runner who can't really catch. Like LeGarrette Blount is basically like the blueprint for this player. And then the smaller, shiftier pass catcher out of the backfield who doesn't do a lot on early downs. And let's say that like James White is the blueprint for that. Now you've got two guys who are big enough to be early down runners, are good enough to catch out of the backfield to be playing on third down, and can also pick up the blitz well enough on third down. I think that ultimately this just makes the Patriots offense a little bit less predictable, that their two big running backs can basically do everything.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. Like, I go back to last year, and we saw this very briefly. I think we saw it in one preseason game and like half of the week one opener before Ty Montgomery got hurt. Like you said, instead of using that kind of situational back system, it was, all right, this is a Ramondre Stevenson drive, and he's going to take this whole drive. And then it was a Damian Harris drive, and then it was a Ty Montgomery drive, right? And I kind of like that. It's hard to do. There's a reason you talk about the predictability. It's very unpredictable, but you need the personnel to do it. And those well-rounded backs are hard to come upon. But like you said, they have, in theory right now, two well-rounded backs who can do that. And I don't know that it would be 1-for-1. I think you'd probably look at more like, Zeke gets a drive for every two from Ramondre Stevenson or something like that. But I wouldn't hate seeing them go back to something like that, where the snaps are divvied up by drive rather than by situation. Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. And maybe I think that, some people might get a little bit concerned about, like, can the running back get momentum or anything. I think it's just a good thing overall to give some guys some breaks, make sure that they're always, well rested when they're on the field. And like you said, maybe one Elliott drive for every two Stevenson drives, or like two Elliott drives for every three that Ramondre gets. Right. Because, I think that Ramondre Stevenson is currently the better running back. But Elliott certainly brings a lot to the table as well, and I think that he could be a really effective runner. And there didn't really seem to be any concerns about Elliott, learning the playbook or anything like that as well. Mac Jones did say that the terminology is a little bit different, but
Zeke's been around for so long that there's no real concern about that.
And I think it all goes back to just Stevenson staying fresh and healthy. And he talked last year about how that workload kind of wore on him late. One more thing about Zeke learning the playbook before we move on to the rest of the offense. He kind of mentioned it before. I thought it was very interesting today that Bill Belichick said he was the one that sat down and worked with Ezekiel Elliott on some of that stuff. Now, maybe that was, I don't know, maybe there's some context missing there and he meant like him as in the coaching staff, but you'd think it would be Bill O'Brien, maybe Vinny Sunseri doing that. And there's all this talk this year, obviously, after last year about, how much involved is Bill in the offense really? Is Bill O'Brien working for him? Is Bill O'Brien the head coach of the offense? So I thought that stood out. I'm not sure what to make of it. I just think it's interesting. I don't know if you had any takeaway of maybe Bill Belichick being the one that's going through that playbook with Ezekiel Elliott.
I actually thought that was interesting as well, because especially with a lot of the comments that Mac Jones has made, or I guess there's been like 2 comments of, the Bill's really great on defense, and like he asks Bill about the defense rather than asking Bill about the offense, and he deals with Bill O'Brien a lot. So my guess is that Belichick probably just wanted to like kind of get to know Zeke a little bit early on in this process, and maybe it was like a cumulative effort of Belichick and O'Brien and, like you said, Sunseri all kind of doing it. But certainly interesting and notable that based on Belichick's comments, it sounds like he was at least part of that process of doing that. And he also mentioned that, there was a great visit with Zeke in late July. So obviously the signing wouldn't have happened without that as well. But no, I think, that was certainly notable to me. And one thing that I heard was that, there was a possibility that Zeke could have just flown straight from Dallas to Green Bay, because like the timing of all of this was kind of strange, where Zeke flew from Dallas to New England yesterday and then probably like immediately had to get back onto a flight from New England to Green Bay. But I did hear that it was important for Zeke to actually fly with the team to Green Bay. So I think that, that's him buying in, that's him, liking being a part of this team, and maybe even that, Belichick said it was on the trip that they were able to do that. Maybe they were able to kind of bang that out on the flight so that Zeke could hit the ground running even more so than maybe he would have if that hadn't been a possibility.
All right, let's get to some of the players that were on the field now. And the first guy I got to ask you about, Doug. So I'm not in Green Bay, so I'm following from home. I'm following on Twitter, and I see tweet after tweet, Kayshon Boutte, Kayshon Boutte, Kayshon Boutte, and then they all just stopped. But there was like another hour of practice.
Yeah.
What happened with Kayshon Boutte today? Did he flash as much as it sounded like, and did he disappear as much as it seemed like?
That was all during that first portion of practice before they really kind of stretched the field. And I think it was more maybe kind of situational work that he was getting pretty involved in. I think he had like 4 catches, but it is important to note that, some of those would have been sacks. That doesn't take away from Kayshon Boutte making plays and making catches, but maybe he had a little bit more time than he would have to get open on those routes. But no, after they broke from, after there was that early, so there was an early portion of practice where everything was individual. Then they broke up the offenses and defenses and split the field and had them both working concurrently. And then, like I said, near the end for another hour or so, there was just one field, offense versus defense, taking breaks. And during that third portion that I'm talking about, where it seemed like it was probably the most serious work, Kayshon Boutte was not involved. So I'd probably still slow the roll on Kayshon Boutte a little bit. Good to see him involved early there in practice, but it was still kind of the guys that you expect to be a major part of the offense, like Devontae Parker getting involved, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas had a catch. So it was more of those guys than, like I said, Kayshon Boutte in that second half of practice. And I don't think that Boutte had a catch when the teams came together for that third period type of deal.
How about Mac Jones? First work against a different defense under this new look Bill O'Brien offense. How did he do today?
It was a little shaky. There were some penalties. There was a lot of pressure. It's tough to fully know how much you put blame on Mac Jones in some of these situations, just because the offensive line is so banged up and he's forcing himself to scramble, he's forcing himself to kind of move around the pocket and everything like that. But overall, I'd probably say it was like an average performance from Mac Jones. There was one near interception that he had, but it probably would have been a sack even before that. And you kind of wonder how serious Mac Jones is taking some of those throws after he's escaped from a sack, because it's probably going to count as a sack anyway. But overall today he was 16 of 25, which is, I don't know, like I said, it wasn't a bad performance by Mac Jones, but he certainly wasn't also like lighting up the field against a new defense. And he said that, he's already really excited to get back at it tomorrow, to kind of watch the film, see what they're able to do differently against the Packers defense tomorrow. And we'll kind of see how he can adjust and change things up tomorrow. That being said, like, you don't get to do that in the regular season. Like, you don't get to play the Bills on Sunday, go back and watch the field on Sunday, then play them again on Monday. So this is probably the more realistic view of what Mac Jones would look like in this circumstance. But I don't know. I hate to be kind of wishy-washy about it, but like, I don't think he was terrible, but also he wasn't making some of the throws maybe that Jordan Love was, where he was able to hit players in stride for deep completions downfield.
Well, if it was like it was here too, I felt like I was being wishy-washy every padded practice, because it's like, yeah, he did the best of what he could, but the offensive line is like, was the offensive line still the dominant? I don't want to say dominant force in the offense, but like, was it one of those days again where like you just can't look past what the offensive line did to evaluate the rest of it?
Yeah, I'd say that that's pretty fair, because, I mean, just like the first drive, like the first play on the first drive that the teams kind of came together was a sack. And then like there's a blown up screen, and there was an offensive pass interference, I think, that was called on Hunter Henry by the referees that were out here. And then a lot of the other things that we were seeing from Mac Jones were definitely kind of shorter passes. But yeah, even on the second drive that we had, when the teams came together, there was a drop by Juju Smith-Schuster, so that can't be, you can't blame Mac Jones for that. 2 plays later, there was a sack. 3 plays after that, Mac Jones, it was a 2-minute drill, and he had to kind of scramble up the field really quickly, then clock the ball. Then there was a couple of incompletions. So yeah, it's tough to kind of fully assess what he looks like, just because there are those sacks that get mixed in. There's the pressure that gets mixed in. There's him being forced to scramble when obviously that's not the strength of his game. So yeah, like you said, like you kind of have to be wishy-washy about his performance, because Cole Strange isn't in there. They don't have Mike Owenu in there. You don't know who the right tackle is going to be. You've got 2 rookies on the offensive line right now. It's just kind of a tough group to evaluate right now.
2 more before we get you out of here. One more on Mac Jones. It sounded like him and Belichick had a moment late in practice, and he was asked about it after practice, and it didn't really – I didn't see it, so I don't know, but it kind of seemed like a non-answer. Like, what was your read on that whole situation?
Yeah, it was strange, where it seemed like he said they scored a touchdown, and then it sounded like he was taking accountability and saying that like he messed something up with the situation, where then they had to run it again. And even on the field, on the sideline, we were like, what is Belichick waiting for? Because you would have thought that they would have run out there for the field goal. But I don't know. It was kind of a strange situation. And like you said, there was kind of a non-answer by Mac Jones. But I will say that like at one point in his answer, I think he did say it was my fault. So maybe that's honestly a good step if you are wondering about this relationship between Bill Belichick and Mac Jones, or whatever it is, for him to take that accountability and everything like that. We'll say, for people monitoring the Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi relationship, not a lot of time spent together between those two in this practice, once again, which is something that we've noticed kind of all summer between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi.
Interesting. One more on a guy who wasn't out there today, Mike Gesicki, obviously hurt his shoulder in the last practice. Have you heard anything on his status, and what did it look like at the tight end position without him out there? Was there still as much 12 personnel?
Yeah, so he was, all I really know is the report from Ian Rappaport that, up in the air for week 1, shoulder strain, or separated shoulder, I think is what Ian Rappaport reported about that. I was definitely seeing more 11 personnel without him on the field, because I think that in a lot of those situations, you just replace Mike Gesicki with a wide receiver since he's not playing in line there. I don't know. I mean, you have to hope that Mike Gesicki's ready for week one, because I'm not sure what your take on this is, but out of those other tight ends on the roster, so you're looking at Matt Sokol, Scotty Washington, Johnny Lumpkin, and Anthony Ferkser. Those four guys have basically been invisible. It's been Hunter Henry, and it's been Mike Gesicki, and it's been almost none of the other guys. Matt Sokol had like a 2 or 3 practice stretch where you're like, oh, maybe he's kind of emerging a little bit, and he's disappeared. I feel like I haven't written down the number 17 for Scotty Washington catch for all of training camp. I'm not really sure what's happened with him. Anthony Ferkser, I would say, was a little bit more involved in this practice. During those 11-on-11 sessions, he caught a couple of passes from Bailey Zappi, which, usually Ferkser isn't that involved. I think he might have had 4 catches overall in practice. So he was the one who stepped up, it seemed like, in Mike Gesicki's place to be that second team tight end. You could do a lot worse if Mike Gesicki has to miss time to start the season than to put Anthony Ferkser out there. But at the same time, you would have liked to have seen some of these tight ends stepping up a little bit more on that second team offense before Gesicki went down.
And the other thing about it, too, for me, is it felt like over the last week, Mac Jones and Mike Gesicki were really starting to connect, and you can see their chemistry building. So you can throw another guy in there, but like you said, they haven't really, made a mark. I think stylistically, Scotty Washington is probably the closest player to Gesicki, as that hybrid wide receiver would allow you to do some of that disguised 12 personnel stuff that Washington just really hasn't shown he's up to. So I feel like you lose. They have to, like you said, there's less 12 today. You lose some of that offensive ambiguity that I think Gesicki would really bring if he was able to be out there. Yeah,
and I know that Anthony Ferkser isn't necessarily like the sexiest name on the team, but he is another guy who's like 6'2", 240. I don't know, kind of a poor man's Mike Gesicki, where he's not as athletic, not as tall, not as fast, but a lot of his snaps throughout his career have come in those kind of like split out situations where he's been in the slot, he's been outside, hasn't spent a ton of time in line. So I think that ultimately what would happen is if Mike Gesicki misses time, you would just see a lot more 11 personnel. You would play to the strengths of your offense, and you'd have, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker, maybe get Demario Douglas involved, just have more 3 receiver sets than having Mike Gesicki on the field. But if it came down to it, if you are running 12 personnel and Mike Gesicki isn't available, at least you might get a little bit better of a blocker if it's someone like Anthony Ferkser or someone else on the roster, just because Gesicki is still, I'd say, a little bit of a liability there as a blocker.
All right, Doug, you've been very generous with your time here. I know I told you like 20 minutes off the top. We're pushing 30. So we'll get you out of here. But if you guys want more from Doug, you can find him over at the Boston Herald and at Doug Kyed on Twitter. Again, Doug, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Anytime, Alex.
And I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have another recap with somebody out in Green Bay. So be sure to subscribe to the Patriots audio feed wherever you get your podcasts and the Sports Hub YouTube channel. Till then, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for listening.